from Dubai, ladies and gentlemen. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a health and economic crisis with devastating effects on developing countries, especially those dependent on tourism. The number of international tourist arrivals have declined by 74% in 2020 compared with the previous years. And in many developing countries, arrivals were down by 80 to 90%. The beginning of the year 2021 has been worse for most destinations, with an average global decline of 88% as compared to pre-pandemic levels. Today, I am delighted to introduce you to a valued guest and my friend joining our World Tourism Forum Institute Recovery Town Hall Season 2, Miss Anita Mendiratta, author, moderator, and trusted advisor to many tourism organizations, and in particular, a special advisor to Secretary General UNWTO, to share with us the current state of tourism and what the broader strategy is. What's the inside scoop that she's picking up when she's moderating so many tourism experts, and what are the unique measures that are being applied to jumpstart the economies, not just what people are saying, in front of their screen, Zoom screens, so to speak, but what is the chatter behind as well. Welcome, Anita.
Samara, thank you very much. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Anita. It's been so much long in making, and this interview of mine, and I've been just so looking forward to chatting with you, because I know that you are one person who truly has the pulse on what is going on. Every time you have spoken, I just listen to you. Because your words, you have a way of putting things, that they penetrate, and I want to sponge it all off. But before we get into the bleak discussions of the pandemic, I really want to, for my audience and guests to know, who is Anita? Share with me briefly your fascinating profile and your journey.
Goodness me. Thank you for the question. And I want to say something, though, because you've opened up, and I think this will answer a bit of the question of who is Anita. You opened up, Samara, with some very painful statistics, which we all know in the industry. And indeed, we are facing bleak times. But you have been amazing this past year with this Town Hall series in keeping people focused, keeping people united, and keeping people hopeful. And that to me has been critical. And it's a vital part of the glue that our industry needs to rebuild. So for that, on behalf of the global tourism community, I thank you, because it really is invaluable. Excuse me,
that
because
means
people.
A lot. That means a lot. That means a lot. And I think it's great to hear, for people to hear, who've been on these town halls and all, because I think it's a time for connecting and collaboration. And this is the one tool that we have, gift of the COVID.
Indeed. And if there's one insight people need to take away from this time of COVID, in times of crisis, people must never feel alone. So again, I thank you for creating this platform to create the togetherness that people need to keep going. So who am I? I'm a grateful child. I was born and raised in Canada and left Canada in 1991. So my background was originally, I did my undergraduate there. I was working at IBM. I left Canada, worked around the world with Unilever and with Coca-Cola. And then I ended up in Cape Town, which is where I met you. And I was living in South Africa for over 24 years, right after the country opened up with its liberation. And I was blessed to be involved very much in the re-engineering of South Africa, particularly from a tourism perspective. And I'm currently living in London. So I used to spend all of my time on airplanes running around the world or flying around the world. And obviously we've all been grounded. I moved to London primarily because I was traveling so much. The South African government basically said I was not able to capture the tax residency days I needed in country, so find a location somewhere in the world. I'm very blessed to have clients around the world, particularly in this region, whether it's CNN International being based here in terms of my main client contact, IATA obviously in Geneva, and the UNWTO in Madrid. So this was, from the point of view of getting anywhere in the world, the perfect place to be. I didn't know I'd be living in my flat for 18 months and blowing dust off my passport. So My family is originally from India, but again, as I said, I'm of Canadian descent, but I'm very blessed to be, as we all were at one point in time, nomadic. So.
Wow. But no, I'm going to push you a little bit further. This you've just given us a profile which is very professional. I can pick it up from your website, okay? But tell me, I'm just discovering something new that you were originally, your family is from India. That's ladies and gentlemen, all my Indian clients, please note, and Anita Mendiratta, okay, Indian descent, okay. But tell me, how did the transition, what brought you into travel and tourism?
It's a lovely question. Well, technically speaking, being born, because as an Indian daughter, of course, I was raised in Canada. So every summer we would go back to see the family. So I've been traveling since in diapers. So I was brought into the industry as a traveler before I could probably walk. And I came into the industry officially when I was working with one of Sir Martin Searle's consulting firms that was owned by WPP. And I was leading an initiative in South Africa around nation branding. And we were doing one in a specific region itself. And it was exposed to the power of travel and tourism from the point of view of not just the travelers, but the impact that travel and tourism has. And that's what really struck me, Samara, was that it's the places that are visited and the lives that are touched by the visitors that have the opportunity to change positively and negatively. Also importantly, I loved seeing the impact of travel and tourism when the world was opening up after the Iron Wall had fallen and the bamboo curtain, or the other way around. And countries were recognizing that travel and tourism was a way of re-entering the global community, rebuilding national identity, creating unity of people because it's their home that's being celebrated, and creating opportunity. It's, as you know extremely well, it's one of the greatest job creators in the world. It brings in investment, it brings in education, it's incredible for SMEs, it's remarkable in terms of women and youth being able to participate. So that groundswell of phenomena that is the industry, it touched my heart. And I just thought it's serendipity brought me to it, but I'm incredibly grateful for all of those forces.
Therein lies a huge message, because people think that you need to be groomed in travel and tourism, that you come through hotel industry, having worked in the kitchen floors and onwards and upwards, you build your careers or through travel agency work or through the airline work. That's how you get in. But you got in right midway through consulting, work, and that's just an incredible channel, because it's not something people normally do. Because if normally we are surrounded by people who've really been there for 20, 30, 40 years. I for myself started as a travel agent at the age of 16 in the
Goodness.
industry, so it's really interesting to hear how you got into it.
But Samara, you've said something incredibly important there. And this is where COVID-19 has been an X-ray for our industry, because it's actually exposed all of the role players, all of the value chains, all of the supply chains, and all of the interconnectedness,
Yes.
because the industry has been broken. And
Right.
so when we look at 120 million jobs that have been lost, I always say it's not 120 million jobs that were lost. It's one person in 120 million families whose livelihoods have been lost. That the multiplier effect of that, emotionally, financially, all of that is profound. So COVID-19 has exposed to the world the essential role of our industry across all job responsibilities, all the supplies and services. That's a good thing, because now we can rebuild with a greater appreciation of the ecosystem and the fundamental role that travel and tourism has to play at an economic, social, cultural, and environmental level. So good has to come at this time.
Well picked. So well said, Anita. So let's now talk about the current situation a little bit now. So overall, 60% expect a rebound in international tourism but only in 2022, up from 50% in the January 2021. The remaining 40% see a potential rebound in 2021, though this is down slightly from percentages in January. Nearly half of the experts do not see a return to 2019 international tourism levels before 2024 or even later. While the percentages of a lot of surveys that we have looked at, that there is somewhat decrease in 2023 of 37% when compared to January earlier surveys. So, as a tourism advisor, what is your perspective of the new tourism in the recovery stage? What is it that you are hearing and picking up? What is it that people are saying behind these Zoom calls?
It's a great question, and you're asking to expose the secrets, but there really are no secrets. I think what is important about what you said, and we're looking at again targets and timings that are chunks of months, quarters away, a long time away. That's a long time for people to wait to get their jobs back, to get their lives back. What's critical about what you've just said is, as challenging as it is, we cannot waste the opportunities that still exist. The world has always looked very much at international travel as the focus. And even using the metric of travelers is incorrect, because it's not about, again, the traveler, it's the impact that they have in terms of job creation, revenue bringing in, all of that. The opportunities that exist right now are incredible in terms of re-engineering the industry in a way that lifts the baseline. It doesn't just bring the top line to a higher level again. Reason why I say this, people talk about international tourism coming back at a certain point. We need to go back to March 2020. At the peak of the pandemic, 16,000 commercial aircraft were grounded. A significant number of those have simply been retired because the fleets are not going to be required in terms of getting the routes established. The only aircraft that were flying were those that were either repatriating people like yourself, trying to get you home back to Dubai from Canada, or medical personnel and medical equipment that need to move around the world. So the industry is starting from basically zero. To get the aircraft back up in the air, we need to get the COVID-19 statistics pushed down. That's vital, because only once the COVID-19 challenge is being tamed can borders open. Only once borders open can aircraft fly again. Only once aircraft fly can we get international tourism back. However, we have domestic tourism. It was always seen as the poor cousin of international travel. It was not as sexy. It was not as much brag value. It's a captive audience. And every single country around the world is now realizing the opportunities they have in building year-round visitation, getting distribution, getting repeat visitation, identifying new opportunities outside of tier 1 cities. It's enormous. So rather than us waiting for international travel to come back, which it will, and we need smart solutions, which we're working on, don't forget the value of domestic and regional travel, because that means that when international comes back, the baseline has been lifted, and you have people valuing their home now more than ever before, because it was their playground for the first time.
Right. Wow. Like I said, audience, well, you have to listen to Anita, because every word matters. Every word. The way you've put it across, Anita, that 16,000 planes are grounded, and nobody is thinking about those 16,000 planes. That means that many jobs lost. Imagine the number of people who need to service each one of them. So it's just incredible, incredible.
I just want to pick up on something you said, because Samara, you know me well enough. I pick on words.
Yes.
We keep talking about the new normal and going back to normal. There is no back to normal. There's no back and no normal. There's not even a new normal. It's the next normal. We're in that now that people are getting vaccinated and starting to travel. Once we have high levels of vaccination, confidence and herd immunity, then we'll get to the next level. And that's equally when the planes start reestablishing their routes. So I really believe, and we all believe fundamentally, the industry needs to look at the future of travel in stages of next. not in one sweep of a new, because if we don't do that, we're not going to re-engineer and rebuild in a way that is genuinely sustainable. That's what's really important.
And you've been, Anita, you've been talking about this next. You've been talking about this. I've heard a couple of your. We've been jointly presenting on some sessions and all of that, and you've always pinpointed. You were talking about this next even before the term new was coined. I recall that clearly. You and I, we presented to a minister in South Africa, and that's when you pointed this out over a year ago. That gosh, it's already over a year since this
Indeed.
pandemic. And that there is going to be a next normal. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So the the virus has so far infected 179 million people globally and counting, contributing to nearly 4 million deaths. So after abating somewhat in February and March, we've seen now you've got the Delta variant, and every day the numbers are changing. And some countries have been in some countries it's been slow to spread, but I mean countries like Israel and United Kingdom, they've opened up, but Israel is now heading towards a lockdown again. UK is being beaten up now. You've opened up in UK, but how long it's going to sustain? How to collaborate amongst tourism stakeholders and other related actors to balance this uneven prospects for tourism, because it's every man for themselves, or is it every country for themselves now? Where are we? Because we've had also sectors, important countries like Thailand, Morocco, Barbados, they have appeared to have done well in controlling the spread.
What you're saying is so important, and I'm loving your question. So thank you very much. I think what's important for the travel and tourism industry to rebuild, to your point, can it do it one country by another? No, it can't do country by country alone, because the nature of travel is connecting countries. So by implication, we have to cooperate. What has been an incredible learning for everyone in the industry on this crisis has been one simple thing, and it started right at the beginning. When the crisis started, the UNWTO, ICAO, and the WHO came together immediately, as well as the ILO, so covering off health, aviation, travel and tourism, and employment jobs. Reason being, we always talk, Samara, about interconnectedness of the industry, and we're integrated. We're not. We're interdependent. And that's what this crisis has demonstrated, that if we want to rebuild travel and tourism, we have to rebuild it outside of travel and tourism as well. We need to work with healthcare. We need to work with the employment community and the labor industry. We need to work with aviation and with travel and tourism. So as it's rebuilding, that is what is going to be critical. Because you as a traveler, you were going from Canada to Dubai. If you had any issues at the airport, your travel stops. If you had any issues with your vaccine certificates, your travel stops. All of these bottlenecks need to be unlocked. So interdependency is going to be vital moving forward, so that everyone can move forward. Because if one link of that chain stops, everyone stops. So that's been the real opportunity now. And Mother Nature has forced everyone into a conversation. That's a very good thing, because that has been, we have always talked about public sector and private sector and government and business and countries and bilaterals. This is a humanitarian crisis. This is not a travel and tourism crisis. It has created a travel and tourism crisis, but at its heart, it's a health and a humanitarian crisis we're dealing with.
Right, interdependency. But do you think these organizations are doing enough to bring these countries together? Are the governments truly talking to one another, or do they even care to talk to one another?
It's interesting. I think your use of the word enough is important. There will never be enough. Everyone, every government leader, every one of us, we've never been through this before. No, and the big challenge with this crisis compared to an act of terror, a natural disaster, an economic downturn, it's invisible. We have no idea where it is. And as a result, it's a very primal response that people are having. Some are fearful, some are, I always say that when it comes to crisis, we're all physiologically wired differently. Some people run to the fire, some people run from it, and that's fine. That's our wiring. But everyone's response to this crisis has been different because everyone has been hit psychologically differently, whether they're a tourism professional or a politician. Governments are doing, I believe, the best that they can based on their point of view. Point of views differ. And what all of this goes back to is no matter what governments are doing, travelers need confidence. We always talk about confidence being about COVID, confidence of not being inflicted by it, not getting it, not going to high risk areas. The definition of confidence has changed now because it's not just confidence around issues of COVID, it's confidence that regulations won't change, that suddenly, as you said, a country opens up and it closes down again. What if you are traveling to Israel and you get stuck during the lockdown? So people don't want to travel because they don't want to take the risk of being stuck somewhere or suddenly having to come home and be quarantined. So I think it's very important that we as an industry look at it from a traveler perspective. And we are them. We are all travelers. When I was traveling recently to Riyadh for some UNWTO assignments, it was interesting going through the travel experience chain. And there were points of confusion that I had, and I'm in the industry. I can't imagine my father having to navigate those things. And plus the costs of PCR tests, it cost probably about between £500 and £600 for me to expedite that trip. The timings involved, the faffiness. So I think why bother is going to be a significant barrier for travelers of the future, which again brings them back to the opportunity for domestic travel in the meantime.
Yeah, wow. I'm just making notes as you speak, because I mean, why bother? Yeah, and that's the point we don't want to get at. Get to,
Exactly.
right? That's what the countries need to avoid. So almost all countries, Anita, have implemented travel restrictions. I'm just as a segue on what you have said, of one sort or of another: travel bans, visa controls, all these quarantines, and PCR tests upon PCR tests. And so as a result, international tourism was totally suspended. I'm going back in 2020. Arrivals declined by 74%, and about one in billion trips was cancelled. So, however, but the pre-COVID months of January and February, I mean, they gave us some sort of percentage, but I don't know, it was about 84% at that point. Tourism is an important source of income for many developing countries, accounting for almost 50% of total exports of many small economies, because everybody is so much focuses on developing countries, but our organization focuses a lot on developed countries. All the focus is, I feel, in the media and the news, what is France doing, what is UK doing, what is US doing, but it's the small economies that are really hit, particularly the small islands and developing states of Maldives, St. Lucia. So it's low barriers to entry, employment of high share of young people and women. Um, what solutions are implemented to minimize jobs at stake?
Indeed. And this is where, to your point, the governments are doing as much as they can to particularly re-stimulate supply chains. That's absolutely critical. But one thing that's in, and it goes back to me saying about COVID being an X-ray for how economies and societies work. One of the fundamental shifts that I think all of us in the industry need to recognize is that the travelers of the past are not the travelers of the future, not only in numbers, but in mindset. And what I fundamentally believe is that it's not just the value of travel that has changed, the values of travel have changed. So to your point, these smaller economies, travelers are now very aware of those artisans, what's happening to them. those families in the stalls that are making the food, what's happening to them if there's no one there?
Mm.
So you're going to see, I fundamentally believe, a significant proportion of the travelers that are going out into the world again, focusing on those countries that they want to travel to, because they know that the impact of their travel is absolutely critical to the places they are going. The lens has shifted. It's no longer about me and where I want to go. It's about where can I go that's going to have the best benefit. Because if you think about the issues we were dealing with before COVID, sustainability, overcrowding, over tourism, all of that, we were growing so quickly, we almost didn't have time to put focus on that. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Suddenly, Mother Nature said, okay, you want time? I'm going to give you a year and a half. And we cannot waste this year and a half not talking about solutions and spending all of our time talking about the problems. And this is why your Town Hall series has been so important, because it's kept meaningful conversations happening. As we move now into the future, governments are going to need support from other governments by creating these air bridges, by creating these opportunities to travel. There's direct recognition of, if you help my people, I will help yours. That's a really good thing. And travelers also are recognizing that they want to make sure that the time they spend in a place is based on a value set that is now future values. The issue about overcrowding and over tourism, we always say it was about bad management of tourism flows, bad management of resources. There's a third piece to that. It was also bad manners. Just because I have a passport and a mobile phone and a credit card and an airline ticket does not mean I can fly to Dubai, show up at your house, open the door and walk in without knocking and taking my shoes off.
Yeah.
So this whole traveler entitlement, but this is my holiday, I can do what I want. No, travel is a privilege. It is not a right. And I think that's where people are recognizing, now that we've all been grounded, how blessed we have been to travel. And for that reason, when we go places, it will be with a heart of much more gratitude than we ever had in the past. Because we've seen travel is a part of our mental health as well. We need to get out there. And like you, how many people have been separated from loved ones? So as the world opens up, it's going to be heart before holiday. It's going to be people reuniting with their families and loved ones before just making a plan to go away. Everyone's missed a birthday. Everyone's missed a funeral. Everyone's missed a milestone. We need to make up for that time. And that means being together.
Wow. So profound what you have said, Anita. So profound. You are giving me goosebumps right now because, I don't know, but there's something what you have said, that everybody's missed so many milestones, personal milestones, not professional but personal milestones.
Yes.
And hopefully we all are given that opportunity in the future. But travel is a privilege and not a right. You are so correct on that, because I think that this is what small communities, the talk that we had about happiness as a part of the bigger fabric of tourism the other day. It's the communities, who are now pushing back and saying enough, enough is enough. Like how our friend Jürgen talked about Hawaii. They don't want the tourists coming anymore.
Exactly.
So, and there are all these big figures and numbers that estimated 100 to 120 million direct jobs are at stake. But it's not just those 100 and 120 million individuals. It's those households. It's those
Exactly.
families. So the ripple effect is much bigger and larger. And I think that's what we want the governments to sit up and realize, that travel and tourism is a fundamental part of economic development. It can really, really bring about change if it is not managed properly.
Indeed.
It can be positive or it can be a negative change, and we need to right now get out of this negative cycle. And if you remember, Anita, in 2020, all these scenarios were worked out. That the first scenario was that if there's a reduction in tourism arrivals of 74%. Then there was a second scenario, was that if in 2021 it could be 63%. with optimistic outcomes for the rest. And then the third scenario takes into account varying rates of vaccination and assumes a 75% reduction in countries with low vaccination rates and a 37% reduction in countries with relatively high vaccination rates. What is your advice for governments and enterprises? How do they need to prepare to reach to these figures?
Indeed. And I think it's what you're saying is vital, because firstly, we are government, we are all citizens, and that means that we have a role to play in the well-being of our countries. And governments around the world are trying different approaches. It's all scenario planning, because we've never dealt with an invisible crisis that has covered the world and that has been as strong and aggressive as it has been. I think what's critical about what you're saying is that, and as I was mentioning before we came on live, I traveled, I ended up getting COVID. I was very fortunate. My partner he and I both had it, but we didn't have respiratory problems. COVID, however, hits two areas. It's mainly respiratory, but it's also neurological. And there's no tracking of the neurological. My point being that even with vaccination, COVID it's within the coronavirus family. The coronavirus family is the common flu. It's MERS, it's SARS, it's now COVID-19. There will be other COVIDs. So COVID-19 is going to be a part of our world ongoing. It will just hit at a lesser level if you have had the vaccination. The vaccination is not a prevention, nor it's a cure. It's a reduction of risk in terms of how deep. So people are getting COVID because, even after they've been vaccinated. Importantly as well, this virus is mutating aggressively. So what Delta is now, what the previous one is, what Beta is, these are all strengths of the virus. So it's not a surprise that vaccination is also not able to be, it's not a bulletproof vest. But what we need to recognize is that vaccination significantly impacts the degree to which you can get through it well. So what governments need to do very much is recognize that this is a way of remobilizing countries, but it does not eradicate risk. And governments are aware of that. And that's why I say the travel and tourism community and healthcare need to stay very closely aligned as we rebuild a world that accepts COVID-19 is always going to be with us. How do we manage it? The same way we manage flu season when it gets cold, and then getting people comfortable around that. They're going to be, that's why I say it's the next normal. All of these scenarios are playing around with the concept of next. What we need to do though is recognize that it's not about us jumping back into tourism. We need to walk very carefully, hand in hand between healthcare, aviation, travel and tourism, and the employment community. That is going to be critical. If we jump, we are going to create a risk of an outbreak that's going to get more vicious. The people that are going to be at risk of losing their lives from COVID, sadly, are those who have not been vaccinated because their bodies don't have that degree of shielding. So we as an industry need to keep moving on, and governments need to keep getting people to recognize, travel at home, do what you can, stay safe and stay smart. And when we're ready, we'll start moving out again cautiously. But this is not a time to throw our masks off and throw our suntan lotion on. We need to still be careful and respectful that Mother Nature is in control here, no governments.
Right. It's it's an individual responsibility as well.
100%.
What's the rush? I'm saying to people, what is the rush? Let's just take one day at a time. Just slow and steady. Because we do have domestic opportunities, like you have said, so we can do the staycations, explore locally. That's what our grandfathers did, right? Not everybody got onto planes to have fun.
Mhm.
So a feature of computable general equilibrium model is intersectoral effect. This means a reduction in output in one sector leads to a reduction in demand for inputs from other sectors, and so on down the supply chain. It also means that labor and capital, Anita, no longer is needed in one sector, can be reallocated into other sectors.
Yes.
If there's a fall in demand for labor and capital, wages and rates of return need to fall or employment falls. Idle factors of production lead to a fall in output measured by GDP at the national level. So one sector can have a huge impact on the other periphery sectors.
Absolutely.
So could you please elaborate about the cascading effects of tourism or
Indeed.
lack of tourism?
And it's a lovely point, and I love that you brought the model in. I think what's important, and it goes to what I said earlier about the fact that the X-ray that has taken place of our industry, and recognizing that travel and tourism, it's not just about people working in the tourism industry, it's those around the tourism industry, the supply chains, the service chains, all of that. One of the biggest issues we're having, admittedly, Samara, in North America and in Europe, in terms of reopening tourism, is there's not enough labor. Restaurants can't open because they can't get people to fulfill the jobs. A lot of people have taken their skills, and especially their soft skills and the EQ that tourism has, and taken it into jobs that they were able to get because they had to survive, or they felt were more confident they were more confident about in the future. That's a big issue. So even though jobs are available, there's not enough of a workforce left to bring it back in. How many pilots have become bus drivers because they had to find a job? And I always argue that if you and I are having this conversation, if we're with colleagues having these conversations, it means we're safe. There are a lot of people that are not safe and don't have the luxury of hypothesizing about the future because they're focused on now.
Yeah.
And that's where, and you and I have talked about this, the program that was created with myself and EHL Rise, it's specifically focused on students, graduates, and job seekers around the world to keep them inspired about our industry and keep them hopeful and recognize that there is a future in there. What is vital for our industry, though, is that we have to stop talking about jobs in travel and tourism and start talking about career paths and opportunity and succession and potential in terms of starting in one position and moving to where one is now. I mean, you said, as you said up front, you started in the travel industry as a travel agent, I think you were saying, and now you're the CEO of the World Tourism Forum Institute. That's amazing. So it's getting people to recognize you can start here, but if you want to dream bigger and you want to get more involved, we need the champions and the mentors to help those people work through and create opportunities when there is crisis to at least get back on the track. So that's a really important part of it. Also, as well, we know technology is vital, but technology must always be balanced by touch. We always need to keep that in balance. So even if technology is brought in to elevate efficiencies, or now with travel and tourism, getting the information to be able to allow for mobility, we're still human. We're still traveling somewhere to be with someone, to feel something, to get involved in somewhere. That's critical. So keeping that in balance, one opportunity closing because of technology will open others because of the human need for emotion, which is strengthened now. So that's where, when we look at travel and tourism, it's always about, if I am coming to you or you are coming to me, I invite you to London, you come and stay with me, we go out to have a fantastic meal to celebrate being together. All of those providers of the food, all of those providers of the chairs that we sit on in the restaurant, all of those, all the infrastructure around it, that's the ecosystem we need to remember. Travel and tourism is not about the traveler alone. It's all of the impact it has on everything that that traveler experiences.
You have put it so eloquently, and you've also given me a segue into my next question: the importance of tech and digitization of our industry. Because you've said something very profound, that technology is important, but technology needs touch. That's really, in 3 words you've just summarized that. Yes, we can't have over technology as well. I was in a very interesting talk. It will be actually launched very soon, and there I was speaking to somebody out of UK who this lady who's all about tech. And then we had somebody else from Europe, and she was saying, no, you need to sometimes, we want to leave tech behind and just go and explore the forest, you know. So how do you balance the two out? It's very interesting to listen to these ladies. You know, one was wearing technology on her fingers, She was wearing a ring that was so high tech that it was telling her what to do with her life, sleeping, waking up, eating, fasting, not eating, running. And the other one was saying, this is all very good, but we need to sometimes leave it behind in our homes,
Exactly.
and then go and explore Mother Nature. So how so there are these yin and yang forces right now where the technology is concerned and our industry is concerned. Where do you strike the balance? What's the middle point?
I love that you've used the yin and yang model, because yin and yang only work because they're connected together. That's the important thing. It's not an either or. I think when we think about technology, it's not an either or. It's like when we were talking in travel about all of the millennials. There's still a whole population out there beside millennials. So we have to always keep it in. It is about finding that balance. And this is where, Samara, as an example, one of the sadnesses that I think I feel when I look at the future of travel is masks. What is the big problem with masks? You can't see anyone smile. So
Yes.
we're having to learn to read eyes. And so my point is, when we talk about technology, when we talk about all of these things, I almost think we over sophisticate the conversation because we are human. As much as I can send you a little emoji, I'd rather give you a hug. We're human. And I think that's where, when we look at these new opportunities, it needn't be an either or. How can technology complement what we are wanting to do as humans? That to me is critical. So when we look at, for instance, travel and tourism, technology has become incredibly important because of, for instance, whether it's vaccine certificates, vaccine passports, whatever you want to call them. All of these apps now are traveling around with, you can keep all your information, you can do whatever. The most effective I have seen is the IATA Travel Pass, because it consolidates all critical information, which is great. It keeps it all secure, which is great. But the big difference, the travel pass is in the hand of the traveler. And in a year and a half, when all of us have lost all control, not just of our travel, but of our personal lives, to have a traveler have the opportunity to have the information in their hand. And so suddenly, if a country is at risk of being locked down again, they get the alert, they can make decisions. Do I stay? Do I go? All their information is there, safe and secure. That's critical, because it's not just about the technology, it's the psychological impact of it. A traveler having information at government level is great, but they can't see it. They don't know where it is. To have it in your hand at least makes you feel, okay, I'm not going to get a nasty surprise. I'm not suddenly going to find out this is happening. So this is where, again, we need to look at all technology on the premise of, how is this enhancing me as a human, not the technology on its own? Because if technology dehumanizes who we are, that's a problem.
Dehumanizes technology can. Wow. Yeah. You, in very simple, plain, simple English, you have unpacked this. Anita, I can just keep on talking to you. This,
Likewise.
and unfortunately, I've just sadly run out of time, and I promise my audience I'm going to do a part two of Anita Mendiratta. 100%. We are not done yet, talking to you. I've done many interviews, but to moderate, the queen of moderator in moderation, this has been an absolute honor, Anita. If there's one last message that you want to leave, for our viewers, where are we all headed?
I would make it simply this, and I love the question because it's always what comes immediately to mind. Good will come of this time if we look for it and if we let it. It has to.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but
Thank
again,
you.
Sarah, I thank you genuinely for what you have done. You have been tireless. You have been a champion, and you have stepped up for the world tourism community during a very challenging time when even you were displaced for 9 months.
Yeah.
So I genuinely thank you for that, and we are grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. I just want to recap a couple of your key points, which really struck a chord with me. You talked about interdependent world, that we need an interdependent world. We cannot work and operate in isolation. You talked about the next normal, and not the new normal that we are talking. So they the difference between the new and the next is a level of acceptance, you know, and an acceptance and tolerance that this is how things are going to stay, you know, and it is here to stay and it's long term. There's something more long term about the word next rather than the word new.
And the beauty about the next normal is that it allows us to do the work we need to do now to move to the next, to
Yeah.
then move. But if we don't do that work and we think too far ahead, we don't have the foundation built to keep moving.
Yes, so it's a, you're right. You know, it puts us in that state of readiness that we need to start working towards this change, so we can all move forward together. That was another key line that you said, and you also pointed out that it's not the value, but the values have changed. You know, and we have to come to a better understanding of that next value chain, I would say, you know, not the new value chain but the next value chain. And my favorite is travel is a privilege and it's not a right. We need to walk hand in hand. And tech's you said that tech needs a touch. This is really, really important so that we cannot have technology overtake our lives, but also we are enabling technology. You know, we are the enablers of technology and we should not lose sight of it. You know, so we need to be in control. The enablers need to be in control of technology. Anita, thank you so much for this talk and this time and this profound insights that you just now shared. And hopefully we meet again and we are able to hug again.
Exactly. And Samara, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. And I stop.